Yo, what's going on, man? Welcome back. Congratulations. I'll start off with that. I'm only congratulating you because you from that area that just won the Super Bowl. So I gotta start off with
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I'm gonna keep it a stack with you, but I don't even really rock with that team, so
I know
I
you
can't.
don't. I know you don't.
I can't even take credit for that. Yeah, I'm not even gonna fake that. I'm not gonna lie though. Um, I don't think anyone at the beginning of the year would have said confidently that they one saw the Chiefs being in the Super Bowl with the roster that they had, especially after losing Tyreek Hill.
Yeah.
Um, and two, winning the Super Bowl. You know what I mean? And
You
so
think Tyreek
definitely
Hill
from
is
that
like
perspective.
punching the air right now?
Nah, because I think getting to the bag is more important to him than winning.
Hmm.
And
That's
so
fair.
he went and did what was right for him. No knock against that, but
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
yeah.
How does it feel for you? Like, I guess I'll start with this. Why aren't you a fan of Kansas City, considering like the moment they're having? I assume like the excitement that brings to the city. Um, yeah. What is it about them that like? Were you just never a fan of them, or is this like a recent thing? I'm just curious.
No. This has always been a thing. I was
Okay.
a fan. I was a fan of specifically Dante Hall growing up. Like the X Factor was different. But for me, I think yeah, it's simple. Like the first time I ever watched football was literally the play that Drew Bledsoe got hurt, and
Hmm.
then Tom Brady ended up coming in, and the rest is history. Like that's my introduction to football. So how do you
Yeah.
not one fall in love with the Patriots, but two Tom Brady after all that? Because I think what it was if it wasn't that same year that he ended up coming in, it was definitely the year after they ended up winning the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So to
Yep.
see him literally go from like Drew Bledsoe was at the top. I remember when I was playing
Hmm.
Madden at that time, Drew Bledsoe was like the star quarterback, you know?
Yep. It's funny. I was just watching a YouTube video as I was preparing for the pod. I just had it on in the background. And I was watching one video and then it was just going through the playlist. And then one of the next videos that happened to come up was like Tom Brady's. It was an NFL video made for Tom Brady. It was like 2 hours long about his greatest time or whatever. And it started off talking about like how everybody doubted him. And that game, it talked about that game where Bill made the
His
switch to
his
like,
his first series, he threw an interception.
yeah, yep. Yeah, it's a crazy story. So I agree with you. Like it's an incredible story to watch. So that begs the question. I have one more question related to that.
Yeah.
Considering the story that you like about Tom and the narrative behind Tom, why can't you get behind the narrative behind Patrick Mahomes? Because is it not somewhat similar? I get it, maybe not in terms of the doubt at the player level, meaning like I think it was pretty clear early on Patrick Mahomes was like a special talent, whereas like with Tom, that was not obvious. He was definitely the non-obvious factor. But once it was made clear, like the narrative is it. Do you not see any parallels between the narrative, or I don't know? What do you think?
Nah, I don't see no parallels between the narrative, bro. Because I'm even thinking about Tom Brady back to when he was at Michigan. Like
Yeah,
he had to battle to get playing time.
yeah.
And even in it like that, I don't
Well, I
think that
said
was
that
ever.
part aside. Because I agree. That's the one difference between the two. That's the one difference between the two. But I'm talking about the building of a dynasty, like the starting and the building of a
Yeah,
dynasty on their watch. Because the Patriots was not a dynasty before Tom stepped up. Like Kansas City's was not before Patrick stepped up. So I'm talking about like that aspect of like coming in, being that guy, having to be that guy, having the spotlight on you, and rising to the pressure to win over anything consistently.
yeah.
That seems like the story that everybody gets behind with Tom Brady.
Nah, I can definitely get behind that story and not be a fan. That don't like just because I'm not a fan, that don't make me a hater. I don't have anything
For
negative
sure.
to say about like his game. Um, I'm not gonna lie. That last drive, Mahomes, I can get behind that because
Okay.
that takes a different type of beast. Because
Hmm.
you have to really think about it. They called that play. They snapped that ball with 7 seconds left. The time would have ran out if he would have got tackled.
Yeah. Yeah.
That showed they had some balls. Like, and in the way his confidence. Patrick Mahomes did what Lamar Jackson couldn't, which is he didn't second guess himself. Like, think about that fourth and one call. Homie had just got stopped before. Man, they ran that read option with Patrick Mahomes. You can't tell me anybody in that stadium, anybody, like most people in that stadium, even as a
Yeah.
viewer, you did not expect Patrick Mahomes to keep that and go get you 15 on 4th and 1.
No.
Not off a QB sneak.
No. Especially with his bad ankles.
Thank you.
I was
Thank
not
you.
expecting that. I was not expecting that.
And
Yeah.
so the heart, man, I've always liked the one thing I've always liked about Patrick Mahomes is um he has a really good grip on on that urge to be greedy. And I think
Hmm.
quarterbacks can get overconfident and want to take those risky throws. And that's not to say he doesn't do that, but he's not greedy when he doesn't need to. Like, he has a really good grasp on, like, what are the risks I'm willing to take and what are the ones that I'm not.
Right.
And I think that really contributes to him being, man, a really good. He really knows how to manage a football game.
Yeah, he does. He does. He really shows that he can do that. Because I was nervous. I'm not gonna lie. I was nervous, but then I was like, nah. I was like, if anybody can manage the clock really well, Tom Brady's really good at that. Aaron Rodgers is really good at that. I was like, but Patrick Mahomes is really good at that.
Man,
So
he managed that clock.
I had some confidence. It was a really good game. Honestly, I didn't really care who won. I had no real like
Facts.
dog in the fight, sort of say. But what I do like if I'm just watching an NFL game in general, no matter who's playing, is I love a very competitive game. I don't like it to be a blowout. I don't want it to be slow. I think just as a fan watching it, especially if you're not watching it live and you're watching it at home, you want the most exciting, the most entertainment game you can possibly get. And I think in this game in particular, the fact that it went over to overtime, like it was just such a good competitive game on both sides. Where at any point in time, I was like, oh, San Francisco can win. Oh, the Chiefs might win. Oh, like it was like back and forth. Really didn't know until literally the last few seconds of the game who was going to win. And so from that standpoint, just as a fan, I thought this was like an incredible Super Bowl to just watch. Even though, again, for me, I didn't really care who necessarily won. But then to top it all off, you have the halftime. I
Yep.
can't even call it a halftime show. The halftime concert that Usher basically put on, which we definitely got to talk about. That just really made it even more incredible. So yeah, this one was
Hold on,
one for the books for me.
yeah. Before we jump into that, one other thing I just want to say about this game that was like really beautiful was the strategy. I think
Yeah,
I think the fact that you saw these coaches who, once again, they're confident because their experience allows them to be confident. Like, they really know what their team, can execute and what they cannot. Really trust their kickers. And I think across college, but
yeah,
also NFL, like, there have been moments where kickers have been, chosen to show up and they've missed. And they're both kickers, man, kept them in the game. In
facts.
crucial moments. I think the Chiefs kicker made like a 60-some yard field goal or
Yeah,
whatever that ended up leading to like overtime. But
yeah,
the other thing, Tony Romo called this out, and I thought it was dope as hell because I was like, oh, I wasn't even thinking that way. But the recent rule change, which was before in NFL games, when you went to overtime, if the other team scored, you won. Like, it was just score.
right.
Um, and so now it was like, no, the other team, even if you score a touchdown or whatever, the other
They
team
get a
gets another
possession.
yeah.
Yeah,
And so the way Romo broke it down was like, at least when it came to that last drive, his whole thinking was Andy Reid is probably thinking this is just another, the game restarted. This is cute. This is quarter one. We just trying to get to quarter two. And so that was just a very interesting,
mm,
because it really did look like that's how the Chiefs were playing it. They were just driving down the field to kick a field goal to go to another
right.
overtime. So
Yep. Yeah, I did notice that. Is that something that was implemented like new in this this year or
yeah. This year.
okay? Yeah, I noticed that because I looked it up because in my mind I'm like I believe it was like first to scores, like that's typically how
No,
it's
that's
always
what it's.
been.
Yep.
And I looked it up real quick and I was like, wait a minute, both teams get a possession, and then I think after that, if they don't score something like that, then it's over.
Yep.
So I was like, okay, that's actually good though. Like that really, because it was such a competitive game. I'm like, this literally can come down to the last few seconds of this next clock, which it really did. So
Yeah.
like, man, it just goes to show, like you said, the heart on both sides of the ball, really.
Facts.
But yeah, what you think about the halftime performance, bro? That was like the one of the major highlights outside of the OT. But yeah, man, that Usher performance was crazy. What were your thoughts, initial thoughts?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Before I share my thoughts, I thought the numbers were very interesting, which are they said around 120 million people watched. Yeah, watched this halftime show. And
Was
so
that
it
the
actually,
most?
I want, I want to get this right. What is? Oh shit, why isn't it working? Nah, it's definitely not the most, because I remember they ended up showing it on they ended up showing the stats on television. I want to say, I know Bruno Mars and Beyonce was up there. Um
Mhm.
and then I want to say it was actually Shakira.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I want to say hers was like 300 million. It was like three times higher
What?
than yeah, yeah.
That's crazy. She probably had that Latin American. It's probably the Latin American culture that she really like. They flip that switch on.
Yeah. Like yeah, Beyonce's well, Rihanna's last year got 120.
Okay.
Um yeah. So
Rihanna,
very
no,
very
Rihanna did it last year, right?
yep, yep, she did it last year. And so I'm going to be honest. I wasn't impressed with this halftime show at all.
Hmm. Okay.
Um I wasn't impressed from an artistic standpoint. Um just because, one, I thought he was doing a lot of moving and dancing, which was cool, but my brother looked like he was tired, and he was sweating all over the damn place. And I actually, Lena really called this out, but we ended up rewatching both of Beyonce's halftime shows, and she did just as much dancing, and she didn't break a sweat. And
Hmm.
so there's that. The other thing too is, from an artistic standpoint, it gave sloppy. It gave like he did not really prepare for this. He just rather took that, like, oh, I've been doing these residencies in Vegas and I'm just going to show up because people kind of know I'm Usher and this is what they expect. It did not give. You can't tell me if Beyonce would have had that show that it would have been like that. No, it like there's certain levels of perfection that would have been achieved. I think the other thing too was like his vocals were off. Like there were times where I was like, damn man, hit that note. He didn't hit it.
Hmm.
It's just the lip singing. And then the other thing too is like I just thought the mix was off. Like they didn't give songs the space to breathe. Like, you know what I mean? And these were songs
Hmm.
where I feel like you really could have captivated the crowd, captivated the
Hmm.
audience, because everybody knows those words. And
Hmm.
so there was that. And then also it was just a lot going on with everybody that was on the field and all of that. I can't really like from on yeah, when it comes to that, I can't tell if it was because of the camera angle. Because I have noticed a difference in the camera angle where like there's super like this super personal zoned in on this performer versus like being a little bit, zoomed out and you can kind of see what's kind of going on. Um, but it just felt like there was a lot going on around him as well. It was dope, actually, how he included different people like Lil Jon and Ludacris. I thought that was super dope.
Hmm.
And Jermaine Dupri, I thought that was super dope. I also thought it was super dope that he threw in her. She had posted an image of her actually singing the national anthem when she was 11 years old at like a
Hmm.
49er game or something. And so that was
Interesting.
like, yeah, that was a special moment for her. And I thought she killed that, man.
Yep.
And then obviously everybody got thoughts on the Alicia Keys situation. Uh, Curious to hear your thoughts on it. But
Yeah.
yeah, man, I think just going in, the level of hype that went into this, it set really high expectations. My expectations were not met.
Hmm. That's interesting. That's a really surprising take. I had the opposite. I mean, I definitely agree on the mixing between like the time that they gave each song, like especially some of like the really big hits, right? Like some of those, it seemed like they only gave it like 20 seconds. Like I get
Hold
it,
up.
you can't sing the whole song, totally get it, but it was like 20 seconds of just like a
You
of
just
a
needed 5 or 10 more seconds.
to really get there. But I also understand the constraints because he got such a deep catalog where, and I mean, this is just, respect to him. Every song he sung felt like a hit, right? Every song that he
Facts.
sung, everybody knew. You know what I'm saying? It was not a single song that he got up there and sung, and we was like, wait a minute, what song is that? Like, no, like everybody knew every song. And so I think when you are that artist in that position where everybody knows every single song that you're doing, I do understand that the time constraint that you're working within. I think he did like 20 or 21 songs, and I think he had like 13 or 15 minutes, something like that.
Yeah.
So look, I get it.
But
I think on
this
the oh, go ahead.
no, I was going to say on that point, but I think I'm actually curious how much creative control these artists have in their shows because once again, when I went back and watched Beyonce, specifically if you watch I want to say it was her, not the one with Bruno Mars, so it was like her most recent one,
Yeah,
or actually that one was with Bruno Mars, but even together I think they did like maybe 3 songs a piece, and like they were actually like it was like minutes long type
but
of
there's a
like going
difference
on.
between three songs a piece, and you got to do 21 songs.
That's
That's
my
not even
point. I'm
that's.
like,
But I'm saying
why
though,
did he have to do so many?
because I think for him, because he has a whole body of work that he's trying to cover. He got 30 years of music, 30 years of fans. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, he got me as a fan, but then he got my parents as a fan. You know what I'm saying? Then he got my grandparents as a fan. So he got 30 years of music, which I actually liked how he did it. He got to cover a timeline. You know what I'm saying? It's not like he's just picking out songs from like his old Usher and then okay, well, what about like the Gen X's, right? What about them, or what about what about the current generation? They want to hear the good. I don't know if he did good, but like they want to hear some of his new stuff as well. So I think again, when you're a Usher, when you have such a large body of work and damn near feel like every song you have is a hit, and you're trying to cover every generation that you basically have created music for. I mean, I only think there's so many ways to slice that in a short amount of time. Whereas Beyonce took a different approach, and not to say Beyonce don't have that body of work, but at that time when she did it, she did not have 30 years of a catalog. She just didn't. So you just talk the context of that. I think is just a little bit different. And then I think the other thing is because he has been doing the residency, I think there's just there is a certain expectation around the songs that he will do because at his residency that's the way he does it. You know what I'm saying? I'm pretty sure he's covering a similar body of work. The difference is he got I think 2.5 hours for those shows or 2 hours. I think the show is at least 2.5 hours versus 15 minutes. You know what I'm saying? So you can really walk a little bit slower. So again, I think given all those constraints, I mean, I think there's only really so many ways to slice it where you can really get like quality out of it. I would say on that regard, I don't know some of the other like little details around the sound. I think it was hard for me to even hear it because the woman at least at the party at my party was singing like so loud I barely could even hear them. Like I could only hear the music and the bass. So I'm gonna have to go back and really listen to it. And then the other thing is, I try not to really. I try not to. I mean, it's hard, but I think naturally it just happens. I try not to compare artists' performance to other ones because, like, I went to Beyonce's concert, and once I saw Beyonce, I was like, it's unfair to really compare her to other people. It's just unfair. It's just not even close. You know what I'm saying? So I got to look at the artist, the specific artist, look at their body of work, look at how they create art, how they self-express, and then judge it based on that. Because I think if you start like comparing it, like I mean, Beyonce is like the top of the top, so it's like it's easy for her to blow anybody out the water. But I think if you look at an artist individually and look at their work and their contribution, I think it's differently. Because I can argue and say like the Michael Jackson one was really dope, but he didn't have a lot of the flair and this and that. Like his was just based on him. You know what I'm saying? Mostly, some people really like the Prince one. So I think it's really based on artistic choice. But nevertheless, I thought Usher did a pretty good job. And yeah, I mean, I'm gonna go back and listen to it again because I don't know the vocals. You might be right about that one. I didn't really get a chance to see that, but I did see the sweat dripping off his face, so I saw that he was tired as hell. But I mean, when you dancing like that, I mean, I feel like it's just bound to happen.
Yeah. No, these are some fair points that you make, man. These are some fair points. Yeah, I think I don't know. I don't. My expectations were a little bit higher.
That's fair. I did hear that. I mean, I haven't listened to the whole album, but I hear that he got some critical feedback from the new album. Some people really not liking the new sound.
Oh,
I
that he
don't know. I don't
dropped.
know what that really means necessarily because I haven't listened to it yet. The only song I heard from it, I think, is "Good Good," which I believe is on the album, and maybe another one. I'm sure he performed some at the Super Bowl, but again, it was hard for me to hear like every single song that he was doing. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I'm interested to see how his album sales, or not album sales, his ticket sales for his tour are going to
Yeah.
perform. Because I believe he's going on tour, and I know they have the Lovers and Friends music festival, also coming up, which I know he's a part of as well. And I know he got a lot of other stuff in the back that he's cooking up. So I'm curious to know how this exposure pays off for him. Because I mean, honestly, that's what it's really for in the terms of him. Like that's the incentive for him anyway.
Yeah. Nah, this is one thing I didn't know that halftime performers don't get paid.
Oh yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, and so it's dope I will say that I thought that was dope to see how he kind of had aligned everything to kind of capitalize on that free
Yeah,
kind of like marketing. So that was dope.
and that's why I think they probably do have a lot of creative control. I don't know like the answer in terms of like who really controls that, but I would assume so. I mean, they are getting paid for it, so I mean, I feel like the only thing you can do is like just give them creative control. I mean, it probably has to be verified, I'm sure, because it is national TV, so you got to keep it within the bounds, I'm sure. But I'm pretty sure like the set list and all that stuff. I'd imagine he was very very involved in selecting because I mean it's his music, so I mean it's super personal.
Nah, and this, and I had to double check and make sure before I speak on this, but Jay-Z and Rock Nation, they're the ones who, yeah, they choose the performer and plan out the
Hmm.
halftime show. So that's actually
Yeah,
really dope.
yeah, they're like I forget the title they gave them. It's like strategic creative or no chief of entertainment or some. I don't know. There's like
Yeah,
some role essentially they've given Rock Nation. Um, and I saw an interview actually where Usher was talking about how Jay called him and told him it was time and told him he was going to do the show and stuff.
that's
And that's
dope.
what's dope because like I feel like Jay as an artist understands like the artist mentality and understands what it means for artists to create and be self-express, like to self-express in whatever way that they want to do it. Like I'm sure when they did the halftime show last year with Dr. Dre and Snoop, like that could have went in a bunch of different ways. You know what I'm saying? So I'm sure like they let like probably Dre like drive a lot of that because like Dre know his sound. You know what I'm saying? He has a vision for what he wants. So it's hard for somebody else like Jay to probably come in and like tell him what to do. Similarly to if Jay was doing the halftime show, I'm sure he would want that same flexibility.
I feel like Jay Z, man, he probably is more so like the mediator between the artists and
Facts.
the NFL because
Yeah.
they definitely be doing some stuff. Like say for example, like last night, Usher taking his shirt off, and I saw a few people be like, "This is a family event. There are kids watching," and I'm like, "That's a really good point."
Was that I
But
don't okay, let's talk about this and then Alicia thing, and then I want to talk about one more thing with some ads. And
yep,
then we'll move on from this. Okay. Thoughts on that because I actually thought it was really good. I actually thought it was really good. And I think the contact made it even better. I think the contact made it even better. I don't know. I actually thought it was really good. Again, on the audio, I had to go back and listen to the vocals and all of that to really judge it. But like visually and the sound, like generally the sound and what I was able to observe, yeah, I thought it was solid. Thought it was solid.
I'm
You
not
seem
gonna
to have
lie.
a difference of opinion, so go ahead. I want to hear this.
Yeah, there were a few moments where I was triggered, and the image that popped up
Hmm.
into my head, was those genuine. dance videos. So if you've been on IG or TikTok, it's all Genuine dancing within the last few years. That is exactly what Usher looked like to me up there. I was like, what the hell is he doing? Cause yeah, I don't know.
What you
That's what.
talking about specifically? That moment? That moment was really short. Like he walked over to the piano. He kind of was next to
Oh
her
no,
dancing.
I'm not even
What
necessarily talking
what
about
moment?
that moment.
Okay,
I
okay,
there was this was before, even before that. This is when he was still in all white, and then he took off the vest, and then took off his white beater, and then he went and changed. And
I
yeah,
see.
this was before that. But yeah, since we talking about the piano,
Yeah, that
yeah, I've
was the
been
moment
seeing,
I was talking about.
man, I've been seeing a lot of insecurity, man, across men on Twitter, man, around like, oh, Usher on took Swiss Beats wife, and then I saw Swiss Beats respond, which I actually liked how he respond, man.
Same
And
respect.
yeah, just because, once again, like the way I look at it is like D Wade dating Gabrielle Union. She in these videos playing these roles where she making out with men or whatever the scene may look like. You can't be with a woman like that, you knowing what the role that she, plays within her career, and be insecure about that. And I think
Nope.
that's what a lot of people are just like forgetting. Um, that like she's a performer, like, and while out of that context, sure, I can see how you could potentially get to feeling that way. I think Swiss Beat, like, it wouldn't be right of us to think that Swiss Beats doesn't understand that.
Yep.
And honestly, I feel like there's probably a lot of mutual respect that Swizz Beats probably has with Usher. You know what I mean? Just
Mm-hmm.
given it seemed that, like, yeah, Alicia and Usher were pretty close. I don't know what romantically that looked like, but he didn't come out there. Like, I really loved how he responded. He didn't come and attack Usher, put him down or anything. He was like, y'all are laughing at the wrong thing. And I really liked how he then pointed it to positive things
Yep.
as well. And so, yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I almost feel like Alicia and Usher did that intentionally, just because
Mm.
it was a night of breaking the internet, and they did just that.
Oh yeah, they got everybody talking. They got everybody talking.
What were your thoughts
Uh,
as a married person too?
I thought it was good, man. Like I look at it as art because that's what it is. It's a performance. It's artistic. Um, and I mean, look, they're in front of 60,000 people or however many people was at the game, and then however many people are watching. So 100, would you say 120 million people? So
Yeah,
it's only so far as gonna go. So I don't think any of it was inappropriate. But similar to what you were saying, if you're an actress and you're in a movie and you're doing a kissing scene or a sexual, like, what's, that to me, that's way further. But again, it's still artistic and it's not real, right? So I mean, this and dancing and all this, I mean, I feel like what else is he supposed to do? I mean, look, make the best art you can possibly make within the bounds that you have, right?
yeah,
So that's my expectation. So I'm like Swiss, like y'all ignoring the facts. Like that dress was amazing. When I first saw it, I was like, damn. I was like, that's
yeah.
crazy. And then it broke off. I was like, oh, that's
No,
wild right there.
that was fire.
I
That
was
was
like,
fire.
that was different. Like, man, she looked amazing. He looked amazing. Like, I was like, it just took my mind way back to being a kid watching like 106 in Park, and like I don't know, it just took my mind back so far. Like seeing them two together. So like I was just really captivated into that moment. So I wasn't even focused on like those like insecure details. Yeah, I thought it was good art, man. I really enjoyed it.
Nah, same, bro. Like, it was definitely nostalgic. Um, and when they smoothly transitioned into My Boo, I was like, bruh, what? Like,
Yeah,
we all used to watch that on 106 in Park. Like, come on now. And
facts,
so
bro.
I don't think my head even thought anything of it really until, like, I hopped on TikTok and saw people. I was like, wow, that's how y'all respond to that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I figure people will respond that way because I mean, he did caress her and all that. So I was like, okay, I know people gonna say something. But I was like, you know what, man, Swiss is a boss. He don't have to he don't even gotta say nothing. I'm like, bro, it ain't like Swiss no random guy. I'm like, bro, Swiss is a boss, bro.
Yeah.
Like he winning, so he good. Like he good. And I would expect like if it was Beyonce, same thing. Like it's not even. This is nothing. Not even worried about it.
this work out for both of us.
Right. Because her music probably going crazy too right now. Like, yo,
Thank you.
this is good. This is good marketing for the family. So go ahead, run it up, run it up. Do what you got to do.
Thank you. Thank
I'm
you.
all for it. But yeah, man. In addition to that great performance, man, there was a bunch of obviously people tuned into the Super Bowl to watch the ads. There's some crazy ads. I don't nothing like really stood out to me except for I mean, there was a couple that stood out, but there was one in particular that stood out because it had like a little jingle in it, and Nia was just like consistently singing this jingle like all night after she saw the ad, and I'm like, okay, this is obviously effective by that company, and I didn't know much about them. So the company is called Timu. Um, and I think somebody recently told me about Timu, maybe a couple weeks ago. Somebody mentioned it to me, but I've never been on Timu before. I've never downloaded the app before, so I wasn't really familiar with it. Um, but Timu essentially is an online marketplace for people to be able to shop for clothes, be able to shop for home items. They sell a lot of different things, so they sell a variety of products, and they sell them really cheaply. And so the way somebody described it to me was like a mixture of like another version of Alibaba and like maybe Amazon in a way had a baby. But these are products that come from China. And it's a Chinese based company. And so last night they ran a Super Bowl ad. I believe they ran one last year as well. So this is their second time running an ad. And then yesterday's ad alone, they gave away $10 million worth of promotional giveaways to the audience. So they're giving away millions of dollars, ramping up their advertising in the US. And in 2023, actually, they spent $1.3 billion on ads just on Meta alone, not including Google, not including TikTok and ads in the US, literally just on Meta. And so this company is coming out of nowhere. They entered into the US market just in 2022. So it wasn't even that long ago that they entered into the US market. And the U.S. consumer is becoming incredibly aware of exactly who they are. I mean, I find that to be pretty interesting that they come in 2022 and then immediately start doing Super Bowl commercials. And so, yeah, they owned by a Chinese based company called PDD Holding, and this is a Chinese based conglomerate that owns a couple other companies as well. Uh, and yeah, I always find it interesting that these lower price marketplaces like a Sheen or a Timu or Alibaba are able to come into the U.S. And really other international markets as well beyond China. I mention those because those are all predominantly Chinese founded companies that have started to reach international exposure and awareness. Uh, that they come into the U.S. market and it really starts to spread and dominate really quickly. Especially because they take advantage of social channels, they take advantage of mobile apps. I was looking at something. I think like 80% of their revenue comes from mobile. So I mean, it's all like see an ad on TikTok and instantly order from Temu. And one of the unique selling propositions of the company of this particular company is obviously the lower price, but then they also have just a little bit of a wider selection than some of the other Chinese-based marketplaces. So, I think this company is really interesting. And the thing that was the thing that got me really thinking about this is because I took a trip to China. Well, I didn't take a trip to China necessarily. I took a trip to Thailand. I had a layover in China, and it was really interesting seeing the behavior in China compared to the US in particular. And one thing that really stood out to me when I was over there is like the payment system. Like, and I remember that everything being mobile payments. Like, I went to KFC at the airport and I was getting something to eat. And if you wanted to pay, you had to use like mobile payments. It was like a QR code, opens up an app, and everything was done mobile. There was no like physical credit cards or anything like that. And this was years ago, and that behavior wasn't existing here in the US. And then we went through COVID, restaurants and a lot of businesses started adopting QR codes and now starting to become more mobile payment friendly and forward, but it still is not at the level of adoption that it is in China, even just in terms of payment volume. And I think when I looked it up, like China was doing hundreds of billions of dollars in mobile payment transactions compared to the US. It was like 20 billion. It was very small. And I'm sure that number is even more astronomical now. This was like almost 5 years ago. And I say that to say because I think what's interesting from just like a strategy standpoint is understanding what different marketplaces, products, services, trends exist in other areas of the world beyond in the US market, and then try to understand how do those trends and possibly those services and products can translate to this market or even other markets where that product doesn't exist, right? And so again, you take a product like Temu that exists and was doing really well in China, and then you introduce it in 2022 in the US, and obviously it does well. And there are other examples, other products that are similar to this. Like I think I heard the story of the guy that ended up founding like the Tempur-Pedic mattress. Did the same thing. He ended up going to Europe, finding a factory that was working on like that particular material, got the US license, and they end up selling it into the US. And so like I say that to say like I find it really interesting when either foreign companies come into the US and how they're able to capture an audience here, whether it be through social, aggressive marketing tactics, lower prices, whatever the case may be, but introducing essentially a foreign behavior to us. Or I find it interesting when someone that is American is able to go out, observe these different products and services that do exist that aren't here in the US, and then bring them to the US. And so Timo is just one example of that, but there's tons of other opportunities like that. And yeah, they just kind of stood out to me.
I'm actually curious. Was there anything that they, in terms of their go to market, was there any change between how they went to market in China versus like the U.S. market or any other market?
I think the major change would just be access to like the social platforms that they have in China, and just like how like social commerce is a little bit different there. So just tapping into that, because I believe the parent company owned, if I'm not mistaken, a live social commerce app product. So basically, you think like a, I don't know if people are, if this audience may be familiar with like QVC, for example, or like, I don't know, back in the day, like those live shopping commercials where people would have to call, like somebody would be pitching a product, let's say jewelry or something like that, and then you have to literally call the phone number in order to buy the product. So I think in China, they were using social channels similar to that, where it's just a little bit different. That isn't necessarily the case in the US. That has started to pick up a little bit. Like TikTok has invested into more social commerce. Amazon has some things like that. So Timo is definitely probably going to start tapping into that. But I would say like that's the difference that I've seen. They have access to that in China. They don't have that here. So what do? They take advantage of things like TikTok. They take advantage of other mobile applications. Like that's why they spent 1.3 billion across Meta. So that includes WhatsApp, Instagram, the Facebook properties. And again, that's just Meta. They also are spending heavy on Google search as well. So they're really tapping into like the mobile engagement that's here in the U.S. And I imagine as social commerce starts to grow, they'll be first to tap into that too.
Got you, got you. No, that's definitely interesting. I hadn't really dove into Timu, but I was just doing some quick research into yeah, more so the operations of it. That's like that's what I was curious about is they're spending all this money on ads to acquire a customer, and they're doing that confidently. And you only do that if you're very confident that your LTV is going to be higher than the cost to acquire that customer.
Of course.
Um, and so that's pretty dope. But one of the things that I just found about like their business model, which I find, which I'm like, damn, that's actually really good thinking. Was so PDD, I wasn't really hip to them, but they have an extensive logistics network, not only when it comes to shipping and delivering, but also more specifically when it comes to suppliers and manufacturers. And it seems like the way they're really taking advantage of this is it's part an efficiency play, which I feel like a lot of Asian businesses are really hyper focused on efficiency, which is super dope, super dope. And I think even in terms of like restaurant experiences, you kind of see that,
Yeah.
which is dope. But the other thing too was data, and so they're actually they're. It seems like they've been able to scale this larger kind of like drop shipping method, where they're essentially directly connecting you, the consumer, with the manufacturers of these products, and
Yep.
these manufacturers are basically just kind of drop shipping this thing. And so it's dope to just see them, yeah, like essentially leverage this parent company's advantages,
Yeah.
more so on the supply side. Because if we think about it, they are a marketplace, and for most marketplaces, getting supply is the hardest thing.
Yeah. Again, it's like a mix between Alibaba and Amazon, right? Like
Yeah.
it. Yeah, Alibaba in the terms of the vendor network, because Alibaba is similar, also has a pretty wide and dense vendor network. But the efficiencies of Amazon, right? Amazon has definitely over the last several decades been building out that efficiency to get us 2 day, 1 day shipping, right? So yeah, I see the similar things with Temu in terms of how they definitely approached it. And then on the repeat purchase, man, it's insane. Like I just know like Nia alone, like just in my household, like any new vacation, anything, like she's constantly ordering new stuff from there because it's just so cheap. It's like she can go on there and spend like $20 or $30 and get 5 different dresses. You know what I'm saying? Like 6 different tops, like a bathing suit, like a bunch of different stuff for a 5 day trip and only spend like $30, $40. And so when you're able to get from a just from a consumer standpoint, at least what I've observed, when you're able to get that much value, like you're constantly just ordering more. You're constantly just ordering more, even where you don't really probably even need the clothes, right? Because you already got clothes from the last time you ordered stuff. You know what I'm saying? But it's just the fact that it's so cheap and it's so accessible again because they've optimized for that mobile quick experience, quick checkout, quick payment integrations, all of that. It's just hard to resist it. And on top of they, in terms of strategy, but they've done the same strategy in China. They are very aggressive with their promotional discounts, right? So they know exactly when, in terms of data, going back to what you said about data, they know exactly when to like press push that notification to the consumer. Hey, 50% off. Maybe they're grabbing like your email data so they know when you got a trip coming up. I mean, there's probably so much information that they can be gathering to look at to know when to trigger that. But they do a really good job at triggering those promotional discounts, which does lead to more retention in terms of purchases. At least just from looking at the one case study of my own household, it seems like.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Just because like when you were talking about retention, I wanted to go look up this. So yeah, it looks like their CAC is estimated to be around $75, but their payback period is 4 months. Um, and so yes, it seems like, yeah, despite these purchasing amounts
Mm-hmm.
not being that big, $20-$30, the fact that like they're paying it, like they're getting people to pay it back and probably stick with them for a long time. I guess a question that I have for you is, I feel like over the like probably over like the last decade, we've definitely seen the rise of, yeah, I would just say Chinese companies coming and really dominating the U.S. market, like out of
Yeah.
nowhere. Let's not
Yeah.
act like 2022 wasn't just yesterday.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I guess from your perspective, what are U.S. founders not learning that they could take away from some of these Chinese rockets?
Hmm. Well, I think the context is a little bit different, right? Because I think by the time many of these Chinese companies come to the US, they are armed with resources that an early stage startup doesn't have. So I think that context has to be set. I think if you are comparing apples to apples in terms of like company size, then I think the takeaways is a little bit different, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's different things at play there. But I think, in terms of like coming into the US market, they just have different resources, by the time they get here. You think about like TikTok when it really hit its stride here in the US, like it had already had an audience in China, you know what I'm saying, of tens of millions of people. So it already had capital, it already had infrastructure, it already had a lot of uh just flywheels built into the product, and so it was really just a matter of flipping a light switch. And so I think that's just a little bit differently. I think that's just a little bit different. But I think the real takeaway though goes back to what I said, which is there are certain behaviors that are not yet exposed, or I should I say are common in the US. And so I think the real thing is to understand like what are some of those opportunities and what are what's happening in a different market, and then how can you bring that to the US, right? And then I think operationally, going back to what your point is, I think there's probably a lot to learn in terms of operationals, right? In terms of like how to leverage data to really and Amazon has been good at this as well, so there's certainly some US companies to look at in terms of models. But I think these Chinese companies, as you've alluded to, what they've done really well is leverage data and understand the consumer really well. And they understand how to get that consumer to purchase their product. And they understand how to get that consumer to come back again and again, even if they don't necessarily have the best experience every single time. Right. And so they understand how to play with price, how to play with marketing, how to play with messaging, how to play with product selection, how to incorporate data. They understand how to mix all those things together in order to drive an outcome. And so I think that's something that like just any company can use, even no matter if you're small or large. But yeah, I think a lot of these companies have just simply had an advantage because of the resources. Like again, in this case, Temu, they have a parent company that has a shit ton of money behind them, and so
Yeah.
that certainly helps getting into any market, I think.
No, I very good point. On just the comparison piece of things. One thing that also came to mind was I would say they just move with a different sense of urgency too.
Oh, for sure.
Um, their
Yeah.
aggression's a little bit different.
Yeah.
Almost alluding back to what I was saying about the Chinese startup that I had observed over at Northwestern, like how they were just moving super crazy. But I think another thing too is like when I going back to what you said, all of these are getting started over there in China. Um, yeah, and I think about how what there's that crazy stat of like in the 80s, China was like the poorest country in the world. They had so many such a large piece of their citizens that
Mm-hmm.
were below the poverty line, and now they're like the second one behind us. Um, and a lot of that was due to their government, regardless of whatever your thoughts are on that, like investing in these areas strategically. Like they didn't
Right.
get to this type of dominance without by chance. They've been like making those strategic investments, and I think it's a testament to those companies like really capitalizing um, on those investments, regardless of if you're, some people may say, "Oh, these companies were basically, the chosen ones,
Mm-hmm.
to make it." But
Yeah, and that's what I was saying. Like the Chinese government has definitely been helpful. Like even in electric vehicles, which is a whole different category, but like the amount of capital that has gone into that, and so oftentimes like the Chinese company, I think it's BYD or something like
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Is
yeah,
the
yeah.
automaker is often compared to Tesla, and like oh they're going to pass Tesla, but like the amount of the government subsidies that that company has received as compared to Tesla is enormous. Now I get it. Tesla has also received some tax credits and benefits, but I think the level is just different. It almost seemed like China has a way of almost nationalizing some of their companies, but it doesn't necessarily appear that way externally unless you really look underneath the cover. And so again, I think when you have that type of backing and almost what seems like unlimited resources by the government, then it's hard not to go into a market and really take it when all you got to do is just grind through it. It's not you're not really resource constrained. Like obviously there's some resource constraints, but not in the same way when you got to fund it off your own balance sheet, right? And you don't really have like that necessarily that sort of backing. That's really what I've like observed from a lot of these Chinese companies that do come into the U.S. market or just expand beyond their market or even within their market, right? And I think that has been a benefit to the Chinese economy, right? That has certainly helped them grow and get to where they are because the government has been willing to step in. I wonder at what point will that stop though, because I can't imagine that that's sustainable forever. But maybe it is. I don't know.
Nah, I think there's been a few people recently. Um, I'm forgetting his name, but he's considered the guy who basically spotted the crack in the economy that led to the 2008 housing crisis.
Mm,
Um, and he recently came out and said that like he's observing a very similar crack in China's economy as well. Just given all this kind of investment and things of that as well. Um, And I think just the larger thing that I would say for listeners out there listening to this conversation, just having this global mindset of just markets. Just because, yeah, they may like from a simplistic level, a market is a market, but the dynamics are vastly different based off of social, political, you name it, just kind of like dynamics. And I think that's just something to be fascinated about, because the more you can like, at least one, that's something I've been starting to try to become more curious about, just
Mm-hmm.
because once I think you've thrown out this word a lot, it's cycles.
Mm.
Cycles. And so there's always opportunities. um I feel like there's always opportunities to, potentially look at somewhere else, and not necessarily say like, oh, that will happen exactly how it happened in that country here in the US.
Right.
But if a country is under a ton of inflation pressure,
Yeah.
and crazy interest rates, like, that very much can happen to us as well, which I think, we've been experiencing over the last few years as well. So yeah, man, just having a global perspective and just being curious about that, I feel like that's
Yeah.
that's definitely a source of edge.
It is. And you know what? I really started to understand that as I peeled back the layer and looked at Mark Zuckerberg's acquisition of WhatsApp. Because at first I didn't understand why they would pay $19 billion for this messaging app that I think at the time was doing less than, it was definitely doing less than 100 million in revenue. I don't even know if it was doing that much. Maybe. I believe it might have been. But it wasn't doing a bunch in revenue. It didn't have a bunch of employees, so it wasn't like it had a crazy amount of talent. It had good talent though. Maybe, obviously you could say well enough in order to scale it to the size that it did. But I didn't quite understand the importance of like that decision strategically. Again, until I left and started traveling to other places and realizing, oh, okay. Like you go to China and like, oh, there's WeChat. Oh shit, everything's through WeChat. You buy groceries through WeChat. You pay your phone bill through, like you pay all your utilities through WeChat. You even pay your rent through WeChat. Like you talk to your family through WeChat. You share things through WeChat. Your personal banking is through WeChat. Oh, everything is through this messaging app. So it's not just a messaging app. It's a platform now, right? Like it's something completely different. It's the way that they literally live their lives using WeChat. Like WeChat is such an integral part to China. And then you go to some of the other Asian markets and they have similar products, whether it be WeChat or whatever that they may be using. It's like, oh, okay. So again, from a global perspective, I think Zuck saw like, oh, okay. In China, there's WeChat and there's other pockets of the world. There are these dominant messaging apps. And it was imperative for Facebook to own that because now you look back at it, and even so as I travel now, WhatsApp is the most dominant app used in almost any country that I've ever been to, no matter what. I mean, yes, WeChat is there in China, but almost anywhere else in the world, like WhatsApp is like the go-to. It's the go-to standard messaging app, but it has evolved beyond just messaging to much more than just that. And so once I understood, once I started to see that, then I'm like, okay, I see what game he's playing. He's going after, he's going after this more mega trend that hasn't really quite struck the U.S. yet, but that's where the rest of the world is going. And I mean, it was right. And so looking back, $19 billion seemed really cheap
Mm.
compared to I'm sure the value that they've been able to extract from growing WhatsApp to what they've grown it to thus far.
Yeah, so when you mention WeChat and WhatsApp, the word that pops up into my mind is super app. Do you
Yes.
think the US yeah, what are your thoughts on the US market having a super app? Like, does it currently already exist? I know some people have alluded to like that's kind of, Elon's vision with Twitter. Um yeah, what are your thoughts?
So it is exactly that. That's the right word to use. And I think in the US, there have been many companies that have tried to do it and are trying to do it. So, like Uber is trying to take a stab at that, right? So now you can order groceries on Uber, you can order a ride on Uber, you can order food delivery on Uber, you can rent cars on Uber, right? You could do a lot more things on Uber than you could have been able to do historically, where it was just like, hey, push a button, get a ride, point A to point B. So Uber is starting to add more of those services to the Uber to their main app in order to try to evolve into that super app. Facebook is certainly trying to do it as well across their properties. So there are U.S. companies that have tried to take a stab at it. I don't necessarily know if the US consumer wants that necessarily. And so I think it really just comes down to like the experience and how it looks. I think one of the challenges that I have personally when I look at like an Uber is it is way too crowded, right? It's way too much stuff going on when I open up the Uber app. Same with DoorDash. DoorDash is kind of becoming that as well. They're not quite a super app necessarily, but they're starting to branch beyond just traditional food logistics into other stuff, other services. And so they're starting to add other stuff. And eventually you can imagine them adding more and more and more and more and be trying to become like that super app because they have all these people's credit cards and all this information. So I don't know. Sometimes the user experience is just a little overwhelming. So I think for it to work in the US, it has to be a certain product experience. And so I don't necessarily know if you can translate the Asian product experience into the US, and it's kind of seemed like that's the plan or the moat that everybody else is following. I don't know if that will work, right? Maybe a super app is more so like a GPT experience where it's just one thing that can do all things through, a different user interface. I don't know, right? Maybe it's through voice. I don't know what it is for the US. Maybe it's still through an app. I don't know. But I do think like the user experience has to be a little bit different in order to fit the US consumer. And I think if that's done right, then I think it has potential. But until that happens, I don't think much success will really happen from it.
No, that's a really good point. I guess a follow up question to that is, yeah, what cultural experiences or just social experiences do you think shape and shape and influence the psychology of the US consumer to where that's just not acceptable? Because I kind of agree with you, because even from like if we put on our product hats, product
Hmm.
managers, engineers, designers, keep it simple.
Yep.
You know what I mean? That like that is always like the number one principle that is
Yeah.
preached.
Yep.
And so just kind of curious your thoughts on that.
On what exactly?
On the
Let me make
consumer
sure.
psychology. Like, yeah, what cultural and social events actually like are shaping our psychology to for us to crave these simple products versus it seems like the cultural differences in these other markets have made it okay
Yeah.
for them to accept these products that we would say are junky.
Yeah, I think it goes back to at least for me, like my personal opinion. I think it goes back to like, okay, let's take a look at the companies that are actually building these products here in the U.S. that the U.S. consumer has become accustomed to using, and has started to frame its we've used to like frame our reference in terms of like what a good user experience is, right? Let's use the biggest and the best that we know in terms of us, which is Apple, right? Think about how Apple makes products today, and like what has made their adoption so great. It is, yes, their marketing, and yes, all that slick stuff as well, but it's really how they've crafted the experience, right? And I think you've talked about that as well with like the Vision Pro. Like it was super simple, like the way they were very thoughtful on how they did it, but it was simple. You didn't put the headset on and they just pounded you with a bunch of noise and bells and whistles. No, they really took the time to really guide you and really kept it really straightforward and simple. And I'm sure even in the interface, it's very simple. And so I think like the I think the U.S. consumer is just programmed in order to go towards simplicity and to go towards a certain user experience, and really kind of segment certain parts of their life into different apps because that's the design of the experience that's been given to us, right? Like think about it in terms of like the iPhone. Like I would argue that is the first super app really in the US to really work, right? Because the app is the operating system, right? It is the iOS operating system that has all these different mini apps, all these different programs that are running and that people have the ability to kind of individually tap into. And so I think the US consumer has been just trained on that mentality. Whereas again in China, where a lot of those consumers have come into the internet age, mobile first. And so that entry point in terms of how you get online, how you connect, how you buy, how you shop, how you commerce, how you compartmentalize that part of your life is just fundamentally different than here in the US. And so yeah, I think a lot of it has to just do with the companies that are building these products and how they've trained consumers. And again, if they want to retrain us, I think it just has to be an experience that you know is kind of baked off the frame of reference that we built, or you have to rebuild that frame of reference, which I think is pretty hard to do unless you're a company like Apple where you got people doing things with their hand. Like that's a whole different level of interacting with a product.
Yeah. Now that's a really good point. And I think Yeah, you made another good point around, yeah, with China, coming onto the internet, their first entry was mobile, where we had,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, we did have mainframes, and then from there we got the early days of personal computing, or even video games, if you really want to get like so. No, that's a really good point. Are there any countries that you visited or are on your list to visit, um, that you feel have the potential uh, to leapfrog like technologies we may be familiar with today into these frontiers?
I think China is one in particular. They're very, very interesting. Like you said, like we've talked about, like their government, the investment that their government is making is real. Like it's real, and they've not only invested in like the technology, but they have invested in the infrastructure. And the infrastructure is so important because that is the foundation in which the technology gets built from. Right. Like it's very important to have basic infrastructure like roads and bridges. And that's something here in the US that we don't really think about. But that's very important because then you can allow people to physically connect, right? Physically build stuff. Because at the end of the day, we spend a lot of time talking about online products, but look, online all reverts back to physical world, right? Like you need physical products in order for the online world to exist. And so I think the Chinese government has done a really good job. So I'm super excited for their continued progression. I'm also excited for places like South Korea. Like, again, these are countries in the Asian market that have done a good job in terms of being more technologically forward in their society. And so I'm excited to see how they take advantage of some of the new AI trends and some of those things. And then another one like Japan is just like super exciting. Like, uh, yeah, that place is just like next level. And then obviously there's some places in Europe as well that because that's where a lot of academic research. I mean, England, for example, there's a lot of academic research that comes from Oxford. We can't ignore them, and some of the other universities there too. So there's a lot of countries between Europe and Asia that I'm super excited for, and then obviously the U.S. I mean, we're still really involved in some of this emerging technology, whether it's chip manufacturing, whether it's the manufacturing of the machines that make the chips, or the manufacturing of the machines that make the machines that make the machines that make the chips. Like the U.S. is really involved in those areas. So yeah, I would say those three areas of the world I'm really excited for.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. And I think a really good transition into the next topic that we were kind of talking about, which was these chips, um, which has everybody up in arms right now because Mr. Altman came out here and said he was raising not 7 billion but $7 trillion.
That's nuts.
Yeah, that's really wild to say the least. Um, Yeah, and this is what I found interesting too. But like, there's only a few countries that have over $7 trillion in GDP. The
Mm,
U.S. and China being two of them. Um, yeah, and even like I think they were talking about um, how a lot of the Saudi wealth was actually looking to be one of the big investors or big players in this potential $7 trillion deal. Their economy is only literally a $500 billion. And
mm.
so, um, yeah, this is an interesting figure. It's a large figure. It's a figure that I don't think many people can comprehend. And so I'm just kind of curious, like, yeah, I want to unpack this figure. Like, I want to unpack it in terms of just understanding, like, yeah, how do you even allocate that type of capital? Two, how do you even raise that type of capital? Three, like, how did you even arrive at like that was the investment that was necessary? Where do we start? Which piece do we want to pick apart first, man?
Let's start with the amount of capital because I think that's the most alarming piece. Because I think if it was like you know $5 billion, I don't think it would have been as big of a headline shocker. Maybe it would. I think it would have still got some headlines, some press, because it's billions of dollars, so it's not every day that people are trying to set out to raise billions of dollars. But I think the fact that you were talking a trillion dollars, that is extraordinary and really the main headline here. And so let's start with like, how do you even arrive to like that particular justification? And the only thing I can really chop it up to is having such a bold vision that nobody quite understands how we get there and whether or not if we will get there. But the vision is just so bold and so ambitious and probably somewhat clear enough to where people see somewhat of a possibility that you can just throw out some number like that, right? And so I think if you're talking about, like, let's put that in more context, right? If we're talking about, hey, I want to build or I want to solve the problem of, AGI, right? If that's the problem set that we're choosing to solve, right? And then you start telling the narrative of the story. Okay, what does that unlock if we get there? What does the world look like if we get there? What does healthcare look like if we get there? What does drug manufacturing look like if we get there? What does logistics and supply chain look like if we get there? What does climate change look like if we get there? And Sam has talked about a lot of these different things. What does energy look like if we get there? He's given his opinion and his thoughts across a lot of these domains. And so I think when you take a technology like that and you start applying it to these really big, massive industries that are $1 trillion industries of their own, right? Healthcare, logistics, and climate change, like all energy, these are all multi-trillion-dollar industries. And you start to think about the potential impact this technology has when it's applied to those, then it maybe looks like, getting there with $1 trillion seems like a drop in the bucket compared to the enterprise payoff, right? And so then it doesn't look so crazy anymore, when you compare it to the potential impact. And that's potentially how he's like kind of positioning it, it seems, because again, I've heard him talk about all these different areas, and how AI and further advancements in chips will have an impact. So it certainly seems to be like some of the things that he's leaning into. And so, yeah, that's my thing, my take on that, on the terms of like the price or the amount.
Yeah, I want to let me provide some numbers around this because I think it'll help root us in this. So the average this is based off of Samsung, Intel, and data from Taiwan Semiconductors, large players in the chip space right now. On average, they spend $10 billion to build a factory. Um, and I found this stat actually interesting. Of those players, and some, those are the kind of like the big wells of the industry, and including some of the small players. Only a little over $1 trillion has been spent in the entirety of the history of semiconductors today to build um to build those factories. And so what he's proposing is seven
Yeah.
times that, which is wild, to say the least. I think the other thing that I found interesting too was, yeah, this was actually interesting, was that right now, just like, say for example, nothing changed, he didn't, raise this money or whatever. Right now, global chip sales is expected hit a to hit $1 trillion in sales, and so it's growing rapidly. um and I think the other thing that I would point out too is, like, investments in AI specific chips
Hmm.
has been rising,
Yep.
specifically because, um, training. Everybody likes to talk about the training costs, which, at first that's where my head initially went, but I was like, after looking up the number, it cost 100 million, which still isn't a small number, to train GPT-4, but in the context of $7 trillion, that's very, very minuscule. Um, but the thing, when it comes to these models, and I think there's been plenty of talk around OpenAI around this, is the cost of inference is sometimes 3 to 5 times higher than the cost of training these models. So serving these models puts a lot of pressure on the business models of companies like OpenAI, Claude. I think there was some recent data, that an investor leaked around Claude, and Anthropic, that showed, that their margins, were actually like significantly lower than people were expecting,
Hmm.
because of these subscription business models. People were assuming that's the same kind of, margins that you were going to get for an OpenAI or Anthropic, and that's just not the case. And
Hmm.
so, in the context of this, like, I think Yeah, I haven't listened to the video where this is mentioned, but I'm curious, like, how, like, what does a 7 times, like, an industry that is already so big, it's in every device, lamps, computers, cars, phones, you name it. What does
Yeah.
7 times that look like in reality? Like, and
Yeah.
how, what does he perceive it as? Do you have any context around that
I
vision?
mean, not exactly, but I mean, I can only speculate with my own opinion. And I mean, in some things that I've read, I think the other thing that he's thinking about is one, not just like the value unlock that exists if we get to that promised land that I mentioned, but the um the other thing that I think that he's thinking about too is what does future demand look like? Because we already know like a couple like recently and even now like there is still like a chip shortage, right? I think there's been some relief on that side, but for a minute there was like a global chip shortage. And so in a world where we're moving towards where everything is going to be ran by more and more advanced chips, and so the demand across cars, across all those industries that I mentioned starts to explode. Like you just got to kind of meet the capacity. And so I think Sam is really thinking about like what is future demand for really really advanced AI chips going to look like. And I think he's right about that. I think it's probably going to even be more than the 7 times that he is estimating. Now the question is like on what time horizon. But I think the demand for chips is, especially for those like advanced AI chips, is going to be astronomical. And I mean, you're already starting to see it, right? There, Intel, like you mentioned, Intel is building factories, but I mean, 10 billion is only the bottom, right? Like I've seen factories that they're building that cost 20 to 30 billion dollars, right? Like these are real capital investments that are being made because, again, I believe like these chip companies and governments believe future demand for these chips is going to just be extraordinary. And so, yeah, in that world, like you just got to build that future capacity. And so, yeah, I think that's how Sam's thinking about it. I don't think he's thinking about it in terms of small incremental steps, meaning like, sure, you can build towards that same vision with $100 billion, right? You could, right? Or you could really just like let's just really solve the problem. Like let's just go with what we need and let's just really solve the problem for real. Now, whether that's true or not is to be seen, and he's probably wrong, right? But I think at least like when I hear him talk and when I'm looking at these numbers and I'm looking at what he's thinking about, that's kind of what I take from it. He's thinking about the future, also thinking about like the amount of value that these chips are going to generate. But I think it's more about that future demand.
Got you. What? Yeah. What is your perspective? Um. Yeah. What is your perspective on the impact? Yeah. If they were to get in this business, um. Yeah. For OpenAI.
I don't know if OpenAI would be in that business. I mean, it seemed like he's doing it separately. I don't know. What do you think? I mean, based on the moves he's making, it seemed like he's doing this separately from OpenAI, right?
I don't know. I think that's something like where that's still kind of fuzzy to me. But I would say like I'm 60% confident that like I think he is doing this with OpenAI. Like going back to the earlier conversations, when the whole board thing was going down. I think people had mentioned that, or I heard one story that had mentioned that it was due to the fact that he had brought up these ambitions of wanting not only to build physical products but to get into chips. And I think it's just a reoccurring theme right now. Going back to what I was saying around like the business of LLMs, and
Mm.
especially in a space where yeah, open source is becoming a thing. um and I think even with like Google getting into this picture now with Gemini, um yeah, the competition starts to look a little bit interesting. It's almost similar to actually I saw this the other day. Google won, yeah, Google One ended up getting surpassing 100 million subscribers last week after they announced Gemini.
That's their like what's Google One again? That's like their
So they're
subscription
yeah.
product.
So it was primarily storage, photos, and things of that nature, but they ended up
Okay.
wrapping Gemini into that. And so if you already had existing like if
Mm.
you already had existing one, you ended up just getting the Gemini with it. But people ended up, purchasing that. And I think I'd read somewhere that Sundar had said like that had pushed their subscription business to like 15 billion.
That's
And
crazy.
so, yeah, so not to get off topic, but like that creates very interesting like just competition. And I think, Peter Thiel has always said it, like when there's a lot of competition, the profits get, you know, ate away. And so I feel like given they're such a big player, and one, their reliance on a lot of these Nvidia chips, they understand that, like, yeah, they're not making a lot of money, but they're spending a lot of money. It's almost equivalent to the whole joke of like a lot of these startups raise money and then they give a lot of it back to like AWS and things of that nature. This
Yep.
is what that seems like. And it seems like, at least for me, this move is more so a play to vertically integrate and control every layer of the value chain, all the way from the early materials in chips. It'll be interesting to see the strategy when it comes to the fabrication process. Are they more so like looking to position themselves on the design side, which a lot of US companies have done, or are they also looking to get in on manufacturing, which is a lot more complex? But right now we know they have the model, and we know they have the application layer. And so it
Hmm.
almost seems like that's a layer worth taking a shot at to really control the value chain. And we've spoken immensely on the podcast about
Yeah.
Tesla, SpaceX, when they've controlled the value chain and what that's unlocked. And so I almost yeah, I'm 60% confident that like that's the play, because I genuinely don't see a path forward for OpenAI long term, um, within like the next 5 to 10 years. Like I don't see them being around as a genuine business, and I don't think Microsoft can be trusted.
You said 5 to 10 years.
Yes, bro.
Hmm.
Yes, bro.
Interesting. Interesting. You might be right. That might be the play that they need to make to really secure their future. Right? Is really vertically integrating, owning that hardware. And look, I think that might be the case, right? Because I think there's like an old saying that, like, if you want to be a software company, you need to be a hardware company, right? Like you really need to own the hardware too, similar to what Apple does, right? Similar to Microsoft, right? Like similar to a lot of success, like, Tesla, the companies you've already mentioned that we talked about. So yeah, I 100% can see that as well. I can't for sure say that the current business will be at zero. Um, but I would say, like, if they did go into the manufacturer, started manufacturing of chips, designing, just started to be more vertically integrated in that aspect, um I could see that being a much more valuable business, right?
But but
Especially,
but think about their competitors. So if we think about Amazon, Amazon is developing their own chip, but they're also developing, large language models. We're not going to say it's GPT-4, but they have that.
sure.
If we
Yep.
look at Facebook and Google, each of them are designing their own chips. Like, and
Yeah.
so the space is already kind of like going there. Um, and I think whoever gets there first, um, honestly, I don't even actually I don't have many thoughts around like if it's a winner take all market. I don't know if it will be that, but I do think it could potentially make things interesting when it does come to like, not necessarily, yeah, because Nvidia, they're a designer, but are they a manufacturer of chips?
Y- Yeah, I was gonna say, I think Sam seems like he wants to, manufacture some of his, actually manufacture the chips himself. So
Yeah,
I think that
that's where
puts him
things
at
get
a
interesting.
different. I think that puts him at a different business. And then I think too. I think their partnership with Microsoft. I do believe that partnership is really important, because I think if they transition into this chip design and manufacturing business, then I think that puts them into a whole different. I think that creates more opportunity from the integration partnership they do have with Microsoft, right? Because look, you got to think about who are the buyers of that technology, right? Like
Yeah.
consumers are not the buyers of that, right? Like, yeah, sure, we may buy some, but we're only going to be a small dent on the balance sheet for that business. So you got to be honest, the real buyers of that type of technology is our enterprise businesses. And with Microsoft being the biggest, largest, deepest enterprise distribution company in terms of software that exists, I mean, more so than AWS, more so than Facebook, more so than Google. I do think like strategically that partnership would be important for them if they go into that space. Regardless, whether it's on the designing part, whether it's on the manufacturing part. But I think the mission remains the same. I think that's the difference that Sam is going for. You can work on these models, you can work on chips, you can work on all of that, but what's the objective, right? And I think Sam's objective of AGI, I think it's just different than what everybody else is communicating. Maybe other people want to reach that same promised land as well. Maybe that's the same promised land that Google is trying to get to. Perhaps it's the same promised land that Meta is trying to get to. But I think because Sam has been very clear about like where OpenAI is going in terms of like building that, I think that fundamentally positions them differently than everybody else. And so for me, I don't really worry about what other products and everybody else is doing because strategically they are just on a different path. That doesn't seem to be the strategic vision for what Meta is trying to do. That doesn't seem to be the strategic vision for what Google is trying to do. And not say they can't change and go into those things, but just integrating AI into search and dropping Gemini and introducing these free models, again, I think is just a fundamentally different strategic direction than like we're trying to build AGI. I just think that's different. Maybe these other companies can copy, but I think that vision, that positioning, plus the partnerships, I think positions them to take advantage of these advanced chips, the demand of these advanced chips, because I think the market opportunity is probably going to be bigger than anything they're doing today.
Yeah. No, and I think going back to what you were saying about infrastructure, the infrastructure is going to have to change,
Yeah,
like
for sure.
drastically. And so I can definitely see where there's a potential opportunity there. Do you think we're witnessing one of the largest pivots in history?
I don't think it's a pivot. I don't think it's a pivot because I think they've always been clear about what that vision is. But I think what's important is how you iterate there. Like, like it's like it's like Amazon. Like I think Jeff was pretty clear, like that he wanted to create this big e-commerce behemoth, right? But it was like, okay, where are we going to start from? You know what I'm saying? We can't start by shipping every product and being the biggest retail store day one. We just can't start there, right? You got to start with books and you got to evolve from that. But I don't consider that a pivot. I can just consider that an evolution of the business vision and strategy that seemed to be pretty clear day one. And of course, as new context comes along, like AWS probably wasn't clear day one, of course, right? Like you start making different strategic decisions, but um, yeah, I mean, it really just seems like that to me, at least in terms of like OpenAI. Sam has always been kind of clear on like the AGI front, at least to me. The little conversations I've heard him say, that seems to be like the very clear mission. And so, I mean, similar to how Google's mission was organize the world's search or world's information. I think it was like, yeah, organize the world's information. Um, Again, if you have a very clear vision like that and the resources, like I think it's possible to get there.
Yeah,
In
yeah, yeah,
spite
yeah.
of like what the competition is doing. Again, it wasn't like Google was the only one working on search. No, they just had a very clear vision and the resources, and they just outworked everybody else.
That's a very good point. I think something that I'm curious about is what is the limit on the amount of capital that can be raised by by a private entity right now. And I think, yeah, part of me is just skeptical on how far that limit can really take you, especially like if it is OpenAI raising. And that was the other thing that wasn't clear, is like, is this
Mm.
all at once? Is this amortized over, amount of years? Like, what does that look like? But at what point does the financing start to matter? Because I do think that has implications. One, just like on the private market side of things, like there ain't gonna be no company that can buy them. That is genuinely becoming like the case. And so the only exit opportunity is to go public. And I'm genuinely curious
Why don't you think
how.
nobody can buy them? Like we're hitting a point where you got companies like Apple, Alphabet, right? These are companies that are hitting what $1 trillion market caps.
$1 trillion
We've
market
never
cap.
seen that. We've never seen that before, right? And so the
What
market
was
is Microsoft too.
OpenAI's?
I think they're what I think Microsoft is like a $3 trillion market cap, if I believe.
Yeah, yeah. What was OpenAI's last valuation? Did they do that tender offer? Because wasn't it like 80 or 90 billion or something?
I think it was like 80 or 90 billion. I don't know for sure. I believe they did, but that was the last number that I heard. I believe it was 80, 90 billion. I don't know if it was ever, I don't know if that was ever confirmed, but that was the number that was floating around on all the media outlets.
Oh, got you. So if that is the case, that's a price too high in the current state of the business. That is a price too high, and the reason why is, I think, one, with the recent rollout
Too
of
high for
Gemini.
who? What do you mean by too high?
For
Explain. Too high.
anybody, for anybody. If you're
What you
Microsoft,
mean?
so what I mean is, I think with the recent advancement of Gemini Ultra, what Google just rolled out, um, I think I hopped into the chat and was just sharing my experience. But even from hearing about other people's experiences, many people feel like it's demonstrated very similar capabilities to GPT-4, which they did come out and say, like, objectively on benchmarks, it's better on some things better than GPT-4, some things is weaker. And I think what that showed was, and I saw this really good argument, which I was like, damn, that's a really good point. But what this shows is that it's not necessarily a product of like individualized team genius. A lot of these capabilities are just the simple fact of like, they're emerging capabilities that are the result of either, making bigger models, adding more compute, or having better quality data, and more of that data. um and so I think that shows that, like, yeah, this isn't something that is proprietary. It isn't something that is extremely defensible and extremely unique, because it's on one of those accesses you're
But you,
competing.
but I'm gonna use the same point that you use with Google. Look at the revenue, right? Like sit that to the side because I don't disagree in the validity of what you're saying, right? I think what you're saying is fair. It's right. You can make a case for it. You could probably make a case against it, but let's just make the best case for it because I'll just rock with it. You're right. But look at the revenue. The business is continuing to go up. If all those things are true, still true, right? If you're just simply looking at the outcome of the business, forget OpenAI and forget all that. Like if you were looking at this P&L, this balance sheet or whatever, the P&L for this company, the financials for this company, and it didn't have a name on it, I don't think you would look at this and be like, okay, this is declining. That's the same prism that you're looking at Google. You're looking at Google and you're saying, okay, everybody's saying that Google is going to go out of business. Everybody's saying that Google is going to get disrupted. Everybody's saying that about Google. But when is it happening? Because ad revenue is continuing to go up, which is not necessarily true. They have some softness there, but let's just rock with the fact that it's still doing well. They're still printing money. It's still one of the best business models. So there's no disputing that, right? So the same thing. It's the same argument where you're saying that like OpenAI isn't worth all of this because of that, but yet when you look at the revenue that they're getting, when you look at the revenue and the growth of that revenue, then yeah, like the valuation is a little bit more makes a little bit more sense, right? It makes a little bit more sense because some of these other competitive, like let's look at Perplexity for example. Bro, their revenue is nothing. It's nothing. They're doing like 20 million a year. That's nothing compared to OpenAI. They're doing almost $2 billion. The last number I heard, probably more than that by now, because I'm sure it's lagging by the time it gets reported. 2 billion versus 20 million. It's not even comparable. So I think it's a little bit different. So I think their valuation, sure, maybe you can say it's a little bit too high, but it's not like crazy expensive considering that they have the revenue to back into it. Now, if they were pre-revenue or didn't have nothing, then I think we'd be having a different conversation. But you can't say a company that's doing almost a $2 billion revenue runway is not like isn't worth anything, right? Especially when you consider other startup valuations. Like, I mean, come on, how can a company, a brand new startup, get a $20 million valuation with no revenue? And yet a company doing 2.2 almost $2 billion, you don't think can justify a $60 billion valuation? I mean that don't seem too off compared to other valuations.
Yeah. In the context of like the valuation we've seen, it makes sense. I think where I am skeptical is the stickiness of the revenue, especially in a market where the dynamics start to change. I think a lot of this revenue is predicated on them, um, one, just kind of hitting this tipping point in terms of AI, just kind of capturing a lot of our imaginations. I think, two, it has been driven by fear and intense emotions, especially at like the B2B level, like the fear of missing out, like where are the potential gains? And I think it's also being driven by this big vision that is being perpetuated and sold around this promise of AI. But
Hmm.
um, I personally, this is just my sense personally, and
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is someone who I'm going deep into this shit. I have I have dumbed down a lot of like the expectations that I had in AI and a lot of the timelines that I had in AI. Could I be wrong 100%? Because everybody was wrong around when this what we're experiencing now with GPT-4 and Chat GPT in general was going to come. But
True.
I definitely feel like we're on the other end of the cycle and things are about to get slower. And so I'm very curious where I am skeptical. And I would say like for if I was in a position of being able to buy this company, if I was Microsoft, anybody, I need to see that stick around because you can get 2 billion today and that shit can be gone tomorrow. And I think that's a
Yeah, but
strong.
it's continuing to rise. So quarter after quarter, like you're starting to continue to see that you're continuing to see that growth. So I'm gonna challenge
It's
you
a
similar.
private company, so we
I'm
can't really dive in there like that,
so
man.
exactly, but I'm gonna challenge you just like you challenge
Yeah.
everybody else. You always want to know, like, okay, well, define timeline. Okay, well, define how long you need to see it working because there are not that many companies that you can name that can tell me that have been able to, since they've released a paid product, have been able to get to that revenue runway as fast as they have. There are just not many. So I'm with you on the fact that you need the
Yeah.
stickiness, but I mean, you got to look at the data you got, right? Like you can't ignore. I should say you can't ignore the data you have trying to search for data that isn't there, right? Like, okay, we don't have all that futuristic. Okay, cool, but what we
Yeah.
do have is revenue today, right? We have a very clear growth rate from 0 to almost 2 billion. You got to give that something. Again, when you comparing that to Perplexity or other companies, Anthropic. How much is Anthropic doing? Probably not even 100 million in revenue. So again, when you compare the context, it's a whole different level. So it's like, yeah, I get like they may like you may have skeptical of the business, but you can't ignore the discrepancy in their revenue runway and the speed in which they've been able to get there. And then you compare it to these other people and say, well, these are going to beat them because the results are not necessarily saying that thing. The results are saying that people are still demanding open AI. The results are saying people are still subscribing to Chat GPT. The results are saying that. In spite of Gemini almost hitting the benchmark of like none of that matters because people are still paying for GPT. Like people still paying for it. So I get the skepticism, but I think we got to be honest about the data we do have, and we can't ignore that.
I would
So
agree with that. My timeline is what are we, 2024? Six
yep,
years. 6 years, 2030. They won't be around. They won't be
we'll
around.
see. We'll see. The contract they have with Microsoft is longer than 6 years. So that alone cancels out that the doubt you have. Microsoft alone will not let this company die. They can't. They got $10 billion involved into it. They will not let it die. And it's
I
already
think they
embedded into Microsoft products that they're selling through Azure right now. So the integration, like the contracts, I just say this last thing, and I want to hear more about your opinion. The contracts that they're signing with these enterprise companies, I think exceed that timeline. So you might want to push that a little bit further than 6 years. I think 6 years might be aggressive.
6 to 10, 10 most. They won't be around the next decade. And I think the reason why I'm saying like I I would not trust Microsoft is a lot of the work that they're doing um in terms of their own LLMs. Like a lot of the research that they're doing. Like I it does not make sense to me in a world where Microsoft one is once again GPT-4 in every single product that they have to offer. then what is your incentive to be building and still putting out research on your own stuff?
Yeah.
And I think they've demonstrated that with their phi models. And I think, like, yes, some people will be like, "Oh, well, those are smaller models." Yes, but GPT-4 before it was big started off as small too. And I
But
think
do you think Microsoft builds everything internally? Like everything that is internal for Azure, do you think it's everything built from scratch from Microsoft owned every end, every piece from the code, the hardware, the bare metal, everything is built by Microsoft, or do you think they have deep integration partners that have existed for shit for as long as possible? You know, they just continue to have those partnerships.
yeah,
What
yeah,
do
I'm
you
sure.
think?
I'm sure they have a complex network of like suppliers and partnerships, but I see a world where and they're building these phi models, and these things are starting to get better, and I think they're going to continue to
But
invest
how
in
are
it.
they? But you have to look under the hood, bro. How are they building these models? What are they using? It's not just their own intellectual horsepower. That's what I'm saying. Like, yeah, they're building these things, but what's allowing them to build it? What are they using to build it? What's happening on the what's running on the machines? Like, there's levels to it, and I'm not saying that a lot of this isn't core to Microsoft. But what I'm saying is that there is a level of integration that exists with these suppliers and these partners, like a NVIDIA, for example, because NVIDIA has a lot of stuff that runs on the hardware, runs on the machines that Microsoft also depends on and need, in spite of the fact that Microsoft has resources and has built a lot of this stuff. And so when I say like, when I ask that question is because I think what I think you're missing in terms of like what I'm hearing from you is, yeah, Microsoft is building these models and they're doing all this stuff, but it almost seems as if Microsoft is going to do that without any partners. And I
No,
don't
no,
get
no,
the
no.
sense I don't get the
I'm
sense that
talking
they'll
about the
ever.
code. I'm talking about the code of the models. You don't need any other integration partner, like, to write the code.
Right. But bro,
That's what
they
I'm
have
talking about.
so right now, so why did Microsoft sign so part of the deal that they have with OpenAI, right, is that they are using proprietary models and proprietary other stuff. We don't even know. This is proprietary stuff that OpenAI is building for Microsoft. What is all that stuff for? Why would they have a contract that gives them access to something proprietary that nobody has access to if it wasn't important, if it wasn't valuable? And so that's all I'm saying. Whether it's at the code level, whether it's at the literally the bare metal hardware, it doesn't matter. My point is that Microsoft, in order for Microsoft to continue to be successful, they need and will depend on deep integration and partnerships. And so I believe OpenAI will be an important integration and partnership for them. How that evolves, we kind of already talked a little bit about like OpenAI potentially getting into chip manufacturing, designing. Microsoft will still need that, right? Because right now, I'm sure they depend on NVIDIA. They probably depend on Intel. They depend on AMD. They depend on a lot of different partners in that area. That's opportunity for OpenAI to come in and take some of that market share as well. So I guess what I'm saying is I don't necessarily think because Microsoft is doing it, that means that the opportunity for a partner integration is non-existent. I think two things can be happening at the same time. I think Microsoft can continue to build out their own models. I think they can continue to do the things that they're doing. And there's still a world where OpenAI can still be integrated with Azure and integrated with other Microsoft products and continue to thrive side by side with Microsoft products as well. Because historically, Microsoft has been a developer first friendly environment. And so for them to even make this investment and then essentially, so self essentially self-deprecate their own investment by building something else, that would make no sense. Like why would they even do that? Why would they go through all the work to integrate this company, invest $10 billion just in the next 5 years to wipe it off by building their own models? That would be strategic suicide. That wouldn't even make sense. I don't think, even if you were a Microsoft
Why would that
shareholder,
be?
you
Why
would
would
look
that
at it
be suicide?
because why would you do it? For what? Think about that from
I think
Microsoft's
I think I
standpoint.
think I think I think you do this. Part of the reason why you do this is, one, it's this perceived information edge. They know something that you don't. And then two, I think it's the fact that, like,
Wait,
yes,
who knows
they're
something that we don't? What do you mean? Well, not we, but like, what do you mean by like OpenAI, or what do you mean?
OpenAI knows something that Microsoft doesn't. So there's this information advantage. And then I think the potential second thing as well is, yeah, just this rise in synthetic data. I think OpenAI, just given that their model is like the best one right now, is being used a lot, especially yeah, that was like one of the big things when it came to the Phi model, was a lot of that data set that they trained on was a lot of synthetic data from OpenAI. So that's not to say OpenAI will not still play a role. Like, sure, if they get to this beautiful future of getting into chips, sure, they'll maybe be able to, integrate it into Microsoft. But I'm speaking plainly from a model standpoint, a model, them monetizing the LLM, they're in trouble.
Yeah, nah, I totally disagree on that. Totally
They're in
disagree on
trouble.
that.
That
We'll see.
business is going to evaporate, bro.
We'll see. We'll see. Right now, it's up. It's up and to the right. While Microsoft is doing all these things, so that hasn't panned out yet. So we'll see. You said 5 years. No, you said 6 to 10 years. 6 to 10. We will see. Look, no, both of those points that you mentioned to me seem like a weak investment thesis for why Microsoft would do it. Again, they're the largest software enterprise company in terms of data. I don't think there's any company that has more data than Microsoft. And so there is no reason to even partner with a company like OpenAI for data. Like there is no data that OpenAI can possibly have. And in fact, in order for in order for OpenAI to even get access to their data, they rely on data that Microsoft has, right? Like they rely on Microsoft Search Index. Like they rely on data that Microsoft has been gathering for decades. So I don't think there's any information edge at all that at least in my opinion that justifies like the investment thesis of 10 plus billion and plus all the other resources for Microsoft to make. I don't think it's about information. I think
No,
it's much more than that.
It's definitely probably information, because I think if I'm Microsoft, I want to see what you have under the hood. If it's really like that, really like that. And then the other thing too is it's not necessarily, sure, Microsoft can have access to all this enterprise data, but they would be getting their ass sued if they were training a lot of models on that. So they choose not to. I think it's more so leveraging GPT-4 in the current
You don't
form.
think they're doing that? Come on, bro. Come on. Companies do that
I
all the time.
I don't know.
When you sign, I can tell you, go read the terms and conditions of any software company. Go read the terms and conditions of your iPhone. Any software company, bro, you are giving up your data. Any data that is generated from a software
But we're
company
talking about
belong.
enterprises here. So
Yeah,
is that have
that's what I'm talking about. That data sits within their application, bro. It is application generated data. Yes, they have access to that, and yes, they use that shit. Of course they do. Now they may anonymize it, and they may have different ways of cleaning that information, so that obviously for privacy reasons. But of course they're using that information to improve their products, and they have access to that data, bro. It's not like it's gone into a black box. Like
there's access and then there's training on it. I don't
it's
think they're
just,
going to.
bro. It's the same thing. If you when you sign these terms and conditions, you literally give up your rights for that data to be used to improve the product. That's literally what the terms and conditions say. Like that's what you give your rights up to, for them literally not to resell it. A lot of companies will put that in terms and conditions. We're not going to resell your information, but what we will do is we will use this to enhance the product and service. Almost every TNC conditions has some language very similar to that. What do you think that means? Like,
So
yeah, of course it means training. It means across the entire enterprise. Like they're using it for everything. Now, who has access in the enterprise? Whole different thing, and that varies by company, right? Like when I was at Disney, there was certain information, yeah, I did not have access to because I wasn't working on that particular project. But it wasn't like that information wasn't collected, analyzed, and used in order to improve the entire business. Every ounce of data we had was used for that, and I can
that
guarantee you,
that
Microsoft
that
is doing that as well.
that makes sense, but I think in terms of training an LLM, I like if they are doing that, they're going to get a lot more of those New York Times lawsuits.
Bro, there's a lot that happens within these companies that don't get out. So I mean,
I mean,
look, that would be my bet. I would not give them the benefit of the doubt that they're not using it. I don't care what they say. The terms and conditions give them the right to do it, and so therefore they wouldn't do it in a T's and C's from a legal standpoint if they weren't planning to execute it. Companies don't do that. They put it in there to cover themselves legally because they're doing it, and they don't want you to know about it because again, not everybody has access to it. Not everybody knows that, but it's there. Like it is there. And I think Apple, that's one of the big problems with Apple, especially like not to go off into a tangent, but when Apple changed like their tracking, their ad tracking technology, like a lot of companies were frustrated with that. But You go and look at the terms and conditions of Apple. This says the same thing. They use all of your behavior across all your apps, all that data to improve the Apple experience. And so they're looking at that data, but they're cutting it off from everybody else to look at it. And so, yeah, again, we don't know for sure, but my guess would be company they're using that data regardless of what they say.
So
So
you
I don't know.
so do you think Microsoft and OpenAI are going to win this New York Times lawsuit?
I don't know if they'll win the lawsuit, but I'm not sure if the lawsuit will change anything. Right? Like, I don't think it will change anything. Like, I still think business will remain the same, meaning like OpenAI will continue to grab data the way they've been doing it. They'll continue to try to get these publisher partnerships as they've been continuing to try to do. And so whether they lose or not, I don't think it really matters. Like, they'll pay the New York Times, but I think the reality is the New York Times will get on board. And so I think that's was more important. How it shapes out, I have no idea who wins or who loses. But my bet would be the New York Times will get on board, just like all of these other publications like
What's their
Axel
incentive for
Springer,
getting on board?
because that content will, because I think they can monetize that content, right? Like, you got to think about it. Like, these media publications have this backlog of content that they're just sitting on, and they themselves have been trying to build a subscription business. And unlike New York Times, I mean, they've been semi-successful at it. They have a few million subscribers, but a lot of these other media publications have not been doing that well. I mean, go look at BuzzFeed, right? Go look at like Bleacher Report. Go look at some of these media companies that have had to lay off a bunch of people because they're not making that much money, right? Business model is not necessarily turning out to be what they thought. And so the opportunity to license this content and be paid for this content, licensed content, is similar to what happens in film and TV, right? If you're HBO and you can license content to Netflix and get paid for that, that's a good business, right? If you can license your content to OpenAI and they're willing to pay you, which they are willing to pay, and you can earn whatever amount from that, that's a good business, right? And it's the same reason why like Reddit and a lot of sites have turned off the ability to access that, because they want those agreements in place first, because they want to be paid for it. And so that's the incentive, I think.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. But I think this lawsuit came out of the fact that like they didn't think to pay them in the first place, and I think them going to publishers now is more so an afterthought rather than something that they were proactive about from the beginning. And I think that is going to have consequences on their business model. Like, is their business model built to withstand those large investments yearly that they're going to have to make in these license agreements? I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
we'll see. We'll see. We'll see. We'll see. I think it will. I think it can certainly. I think it could totally sustain it. I mean, again, a parallel would be a Netflix, right? Look at how much money they
Yeah.
spend on content and have to pay out. So clearly, the business model works at that level, right? Where you're paying out a lot for those assets. I'd imagine, like, the New York Times. Yeah, they may make a lot off of OpenAI, but I mean, it probably won't be like crazy, like, you know what I'm saying? But it's still like, I mean, if you're making tens of millions of dollars in free cash flow from just licensing content, look, from a pure P&L standpoint, I mean, that's good. That's good revenue. That's good business, right? That's revenue that we wouldn't have captured otherwise. And then we still can sell our subscription, still continue business as it doesn't require anything for us. All you need is access to the API, and you're going to pay us for that. I don't think that's a bad business. And I don't think it matters that they didn't do it first or whatever. I think, again, I think the reality is OpenAI is proven that they have distribution. I think it's reflective in their revenue. I think it's reflective in their user numbers. I think it's reflective in their partnerships. The sustainability, I agree with you, is in question, but I think they've built that. And so I think media companies like New York Times will eventually have to get on board. And again, maybe OpenAI may have to pay up because they didn't ask first, but I don't think that changes. I mean, just like Uber was launching in cities, I mean, that didn't stop Uber from, going into these cities. I mean, it certainly slowed them down, but I mean, shit, Uber is still in New York, right? It's still in LA. It's still here, right? Like, so I think about it in that same vein, at least in my mind.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
I just think depending on how this case goes, it potentially can set an interesting precedent.
That's true. That's true. Especially, man, if it gets, man, I wonder how far it'll go, right? Like,
Yeah.
if this becomes like a Supreme Court, I don't know if it'll go to that far, but like if it becomes like law of the land from this case, then yeah, that certainly could shake things up in terms of how these deals make. But look, I think like I said, if any publisher can license that back catalog, I mean, again, like the New York Times has been around for 100 years, right? Like, you as a reader probably is not reading stuff that they did in the early 1900s. But if they can monetize that, I mean, that seems like a good business. And I don't think they should do exclusives necessarily. I don't know if these media companies are doing that. We didn't talk about that, but I imagine Google already has some of these media partnerships in place. So maybe they're starting from a different position because they already have these agreements. But, Perplexity at some point might have to strike some of these similar deals, or, some of these, Anthropic. I don't know exactly how they're approaching it, but they may have to strike some of these similar deals as well.
No, that's a really good point. Yeah, it's gonna get interesting. I like bull bets, man. That's my bull
Of course.
bet, man.
Of course. I love it. I respect it, bro. I respect it, man. I respect it.
Yeah.
I respect it, man. What else? You got anything else you want to wrap it up?
Nah, I think yeah, I'll just say this shortly, but Bitcoin passed 50K. And this was for the first time since 2021.
That's big.
Yeah. And you have I think what you're starting to see is a few things start to be priced in to drive this. One, the anticipation of the Bitcoin halving, I think, happened in April. Which is always a significant event, and you always see a significant bump. But then I also think, just like the introduction last month of the spot ETF as well. Like, I think you're going over time. Like, I would actually, if I was to put a time over, I think over the next year or two, yeah, as we start to see how the economy really plays out in terms of like this soft landing, and we see a lot more money start to flow back to riskier asset classes, especially at the institutional level. I think that's where shit can get very interesting, because this whole Bitcoin ETF is all about, hey, you can have Bitcoin in your pocket and you ain't got to have no wallet. You don't have to go through the complicated Web3 stuff. And I think this unlocks a very interesting value prop for institutions. And it's well known that, like, at an institutional level, a lot of these hedge funds, et cetera, drive the markets of the equities. I think you potentially could see something interesting here too. And I think even for like Ethereum, there's an ETF that's being worked on as well. And so, yeah, this, I don't know how you want to frame it, but this abstraction of the complexity behind familiar things is starting to emerge in that world, and that's very interesting.
What was Bitcoin's price at? Do you know where it was at, like pre-pandemic? Like, is it? Because I don't really track Bitcoin or crypto as much. I mean, occasionally, if I see the headline, if it hits like all-time high, it might catch my attention, but it's not something I'm actively looking at. I'm curious to know, like, how does this current price compare to like pre-pandemic, or like maybe right after the pandemic? I guess, where is it relative to where it's been over the last couple of years?
Yeah. So, looking at the information right here. So, in 2019, January of 2019, Bitcoin was at $3,800.
$3,800. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. It ended the
Damn.
year it ended the year of 2019 at $7,200. And then going into the pandemic in 2020, it reached an all-time high at the end of the year of $29,374.
That's crazy.
And so we've almost seen a doubling since then. And this is in a period of time where capital hasn't been as free-flowing as it was during the pandemic. And still in this quote unquote crypto bear market. And so I think it's, yeah, I'm bullish on it long term, just for the simple fact of, like, one, I've always just seen this thing go up. I just have never been patient enough to just hold on to it. Two, the second thing as well is, like, I think I was listening to like a podcast from Andreessen on it, and one of the partners, the way he broke it down was like, yeah, just thinking about money. Money is just a collection of beliefs. Like, it took a handful of people to believe that this thing had value for it to really have value, and then from there start to, you know, propagate across the world. And I think that's
That's true.
what you're seeing here too, is the belief in it. That, like, it's, when it comes to Bitcoin, I'm more attached to like the intangibles. Like, specifically what I pay attention to are devs. Do developers believe in this? Because it's a digital currency, and it always starts with them first.
Yep. No, I 100% agree with that. The developer ecosystem will tell you quite a bit around like what the future might hold in terms of how that particular ecosystem might shape up. I agree because I was when Solana was kind of going on as up and up.
Yep.
The price of Solana was kind of seemed like semi correlated to the activity from the developer ecosystem.
Yep.
Like more developers were just starting to integrate it, use it, mess around with it, and so that got it going up and up and up. And same thing on Ethereum as well. So no, that's a good point to look at. Maybe I need to track more crypto, man. I kind of put it on the back burner because I thought
It's
like,
still
oh,
early.
we're in this bubble, it bursts, it's done, it's dead. I'm still asking myself like, what's the importance of this technology um, outside of the transaction piece? Like, I get the value in terms of like allowing somebody to transact peer to peer in terms of like cutting out the middleman, but like that seemed like you can probably solve that if you just what I mean, I don't know if Bitcoin is the answer for that because of the price and well, not necessarily the volatility of the price, but because of the volume, right? But maybe there's just like we just need some digital coin. It seems like that's the real thing that we're solving for. Um, so I guess outside of that context, I'm always confused on like the other opportunities that exist in crypto.
I think the crypto, yeah, the crypto opportunity that I'm just, yeah, waiting for is at the intersection of AI. And so Vitalik, the founder of Ethereum, he recently wrote a post on just four kind of main plays that he saw at the intersection of AI and crypto. I haven't got around to reading it yet, and so just throwing that out there for anybody that does
Mm-hmm.
want to read it because it recently came out. But the thing that
Okay.
I'm most excited for, and I've always viewed the blockchain as a public
Mm.
utility. And the reason why this is important is because if we look at electric, if we look at, you know, what gas and things of that nature, there are certain utilities that did not start off that way. And even if
That's true.
even if they're controlled by companies or whatever, um, they're just in some sense they're general technologies that you just can't go through. And I think this is going to emerge because of the pressure. Well, not necessarily, pressure is not the right word, but more so the shift that our society is going to go through, when it comes to data. When
Mm.
it comes to data, and I think unless there are other technologies that are out there, and I'm sure somebody's working on it or whatever, and I'm sure there's with our existing technologies, there's probably some workarounds or whatever. But I do think there's going to be a paradigm shift where people are going to want to own their information. And I think right now you're seeing it with the big
Absolutely.
players, New York
Yeah.
Times, for example, or Reddit, for example. Everything always starts up top and eventually makes its way down. And I think, um, yeah, I'm just kind of I don't know what that's going to look like, but I'm curious to see what that looks like. Will the catalyst be agents? Um, will the catalyst be AGI? Like, will the catalyst be a mixture of like socioeconomics where people are out of work, but they have this valuable asset called data that they potentially can trade for something? Um, and so I've always viewed the blockchain as this public utility, more so this public database that we're all going to have access to, and it's going to cost something, aka gas fees, to be
Hmm.
able to act. And so right now, I actually read this really good post the other day where it was talking about Ethereum potentially being AOL, meaning it's at the top right now, but because of the gas fees being so high, it's very hard to transact on it because it's
Right.
expensive, right?
Right. Yep.
And obviously you got like the L2s and things of that nature, but like how good are those? Because they're just another abstraction. But I say all that to say, like, I really do think the opportunity is going to emerge as this need to have ownership and provenance over data becomes an increasing thing. And that's where I think the blockchain, I don't know what that means for crypto, in terms of tokens and things of that nature. I do think that's one potential way to, govern, how data is used and things of that. It could get very interesting. But I think more so, I'm like the blockchain more, and also ZK rollups and ZK syncs. That technology is very interesting, um, as well. And there's some, actually, I got one homie who would be very good for this podcast. His name is Lance. He used to be an investor over at on the Andreessen crypto team, but he specifically is building ZK syncs, at the intersection of the blockchain and AI. And when you hear him just break down some of that stuff, like, and he spends a lot of time in these emerging markets where a lot of these crypto and blockchain technologies are being adopted. And it's just very interesting to just hear his world perspective on it as well. But that's just kind of the thing that I'm seeing or thinking about.
Yeah, no. You said a lot of interesting stuff. I need to maybe tap back into it. All I know is it seems like A16Z might be best positioned because I'm sure there's other funds as well, but they were always seem like super bullish on crypto in general for, I mean, not always, but for a while, for a long time. Like they've obviously made some big investments, dedicated funds. Like they've been early in just deploying capital. Some of it I'm sure has just been like set on fire and they'll never get it
Well,
back.
their financing
But
was interesting because their traditional financing, at least for some of their companies, wasn't traditional in terms of we gave you capital and we took equity. What
it
they
was the
took,
coins, right?
yes, they took the coins, and because
Yeah,
of that, it was very similar to stocks. When that bitch was high, they got out of them. And I
they got
remember
out. Yeah,
I remember because you literally, because it's public, you can go look at these wallets, and you would see like, nah, they doing big dumps. And
mm.
so they definitely came, like, despite some of these companies going to zero, trust me, if they got in on that token, they definitely got in and got out and cashed out.
Mm. Yeah. No, that's true. That's true. I definitely saw some headlines, and I think they got some public pushback. I don't know how
Yeah.
big it got, the pushback bot, but they definitely got some pushback because they did do that, right? So they definitely saw some liquidity. But nevertheless, they're still invested in that space. Obviously, because they've been able to make those returns back, I would hope they've taken, repay back some of the fund and then taken some of that and actually making some wild bets that, hopefully pays off. So we'll see. But they seem well positioned either way it goes. I mean, the fact that you can make these skeptical bets and still be able to cash out so early is a win on their partnership team for structuring those deals in that way.
Nah, 100%. A book. And so before we wrap up, a book everybody should go check out. I ain't ready yet, but I'm definitely going to read it just because, yeah, all the smart people I follow is talking about it. So I got to tap in with it. But it's Read, Write, Own by Chris Dixon. And he's just talking about, the power of blockchains and kind of what that looks like for the future of the internet. Um, yeah, and I think this is just one of those people who from the beginning has championed this, and he's doing this a decade later, still being the champion, even going to Capitol Hill and fighting legally for this technology to have a place. You're not doing that because you're crazy. You're doing that because you're winning. Like, we
That's
just have to,
facts.
like, he has an incentive here, and I think he's probably seen his incentive grow a little bit stronger. And I think this is just one of those. This is probably a piece of information that will better help us understand the frontier.
Yep, I agree. No, that's a good recommendation. I was not familiar with that book, so I'll definitely add that to my list because I know Chris Dixon is definitely one that's well respected in this space, not only just in crypto but as an investor in general. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure he has a huge wealth of knowledge to share. So no, I appreciate that insight, man.
Of course, man. Of course, man.
Bet it up. Let's wrap it up, man. This was a good conversation, man. Look forward to the next one.
Yes, sir.